Hello and welcome back to HEMA Fight Breakdowns. Today we're going to be breaking down one of my fights from AGO 2025, specifically so we can talk about self-calling. As you could probably tell by the fact that I wasn't in any of my own previous videos, I didn't do all that well at AGO, and as a result I ended up losing in the top 16 of the losers bracket. Just as a little bit of a review and for some context, I went 3-2 in pools, won my first elimination bracket match, but then lost the second round to Stephen Chaney, as sort of expected. And then this is my first round of the double elimination bracket, and I lose this one as well. But as I mentioned earlier, the reason I lose it is because I deny some pretty key points. So we're going to take a look at this fight, what limited bits of information that I have, and we're going to talk a little bit about whether or not it's the right thing to do to deny points or whether or not it's something that you should maybe stop doing. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to talk about anything that leads up to this conclusive exchange. I'm just going to talk about the exchange in question. And for a little bit of context, the score is 5-7 with me having 7. And that means that I only need 3 points to win the fight. The fight goes to 10 points. So in this exchange, my opponent throws a bit of a hand shot. I parry it. I leap into action, trying to throw a short edge shield how cut towards my opponent's head, which appears from the footage to get like maybe a little piece of the head, but not a whole lot. At the exact same time, my opponent comes in with an undercut that lands straight to my hand. So from watching the footage, it really should have been probably ruled a little bit of a double, but that's not what the judges said. At the time, during their conference, both judges went to each other and said that they saw nothing from White. They thought that that undercut was just an attempted parry, and they saw me land a clean headshot, which would have given me the 3 points I needed to win. However, I very quickly denied these points and reset the exchange to 0. And the problem, as you can probably tell, is that not only did I literally just give up the win, but in the next couple exchanges, I gave my opponent ample opportunity to come back. So again, in the interest of time, we're just going to go over the final exchange here. As you can see from the score, my opponent has already managed to get another 4 points on me, making it 9-7 as opposed to the 5-7 it was before. And in this final exchange, I get a parry. I go for a very deep grapple exchange, and my opponent just throws that Zverik right into my armpit, which I don't really do anything about. So he gets the 1 point he needs to hit 10, and he wins. But this is where the key thing happens. Now, after this exchange happens, I go over to my opponent and I say, congratulations. And he says the one set of crushing words that I don't think was intentionally supposed to be crushing, but has stuck with me for about 3 weeks now, which was, thanks for an honorable fight. And those words stuck with me because every time I go back and I think about this fight and these last couple exchanges, I don't necessarily know that the feeling of being honorable is making up for the fact that I lost. But that's the part where we get to talk about self-calls. So going back to this pivotal exchange, the question is, was my self-call more accurate or less accurate than the judge's call? Again, watching the footage, it does really seem like I get a little bit of a piece of my target. And under the rules of the tournament, this would have been more than enough to consider a valid attack. It skipping off doesn't necessarily mean that my edge alignment was bad. It doesn't mean that my arc of rotation was bad. It doesn't mean that my percussiveness was bad, even though that wasn't a requirement. So under the rules, I really should have gotten these 3 points and won. But also under the rules, I had the ability to deny my points and deny myself my victory. But again, the question is, was my self-call accurate? And the answer is no. And this is a thing that I think a lot of people struggle with in the HEMA community. They want to believe that their perspective as the fencer in the fight who just executed the exchange has a more accurate understanding of what happened than the judges or the cameraman. And the simple fact of the matter is that they're not more or less accurate. Their accuracy is about the same. It's very true that someone can tell you whether or not they got hit with a pretty fair amount of accuracy, and they can usually tell you whether or not they landed a hit with a fair amount of accuracy. But so can the judges, and so can the camera. And as we can see here, there is definitely a gray area where everybody has the opportunity to be wrong, but everyone's opportunity is pretty much equal. Now, I've advocated for this position a couple times in other videos, and I'm going to say it again here. I don't think that fencers in a tournament should ever self-call. And that's probably going to be a very unpopular opinion, but it's not just accuracy that I think is the problem when it comes to self-calling. It's not just the fact that inserting your opinion on what happened into the deliberation of the judges, however many there may be, really only serves to muddy the waters and put some kind of authority on your perspective where authority really shouldn't exist. It's also the fact that at the end of the day, a fighter should always be advocating for themselves in their own fight. And the reason for that isn't just a technical or martial perspective. It's also a mental perspective in the sense that if you are not advocating for yourself, then by definition, you're advocating against yourself. And if you are a fighter and you're really trying your best and you're really trying to win, having the mindset in which you are at any point going to advocate against yourself means that you're basically looking for your own failures during your fight and not your own successes. It's very common for me to talk to some of the people that I go to fence with and who used to be a part of my club and ask them how their tournament experience went. And I find 9 times out of 10, if they at any point advocated against themselves, that is the negative experience that they remember that pretty much overshadows everything. And that was absolutely the experience that I had. Coming away from AGO, I felt absolutely terrible. Even though I didn't really do that bad, I managed to beat Jeff Will, who was someone who is, I think, genuinely better than me. And all of that was overshadowed by the fact that I threw a fight. I threw a fight and just dumpstered it, and I lost against someone I probably shouldn't have, and now I feel bad. Everything else that happens before it just gets completely washed away in favor of that one thing where I advocated against myself. And I really do think that negative experience and that negative mental space had such an adverse effect on me that it basically ruined my whole weekend. So if you need another reason not to advocate against yourself when it comes to this, well, here it is. Maybe at the end of the day, if you ever start self-calling, you're going to put yourself in a mental space where you're thinking, oh, well, I'm just doing badly. This person's better than me. The judges are blind. They're not seeing the reality for what it is. And now, whenever you do get those things that maybe could squeak their way past the judges, or maybe should be called because they were genuinely close, you're always going to advocate against yourself, and your opponent is going to have a extremely huge advantage against you. They're probably going to beat you. And when they do, it will be your fault. Not because you didn't fence well, but because you basically told yourself that you don't fence well. Now, there's one other aspect to this discussion that I think really plays into this scenario very well, which is, in my mind, the opposite of self-calling, celebrating. Now, celebrating is something that is very much looked down upon in the HEMA community, and for much of the same reasons that self-calling is looked so favorably. The idea here is that if you go into an exchange and you use your honor to basically take something away from yourself, well, then you're being a good person. But if you go in and you score something really well and then you celebrate, you're doing something really bad because you are basically hyping yourself up. And the issue, I think, is that this is kind of a backwards take on how fighters should be thinking of themselves and of the fight when they're in it. And it creates a scenario where people who are genuinely trying to win now have to live in opposite world, where they have to try to throw out anything they think that's close, and they have to never ever be happy with anything that they achieve in the fight, lest they be seen as dishonorable. So the very idea here is that whenever you're trying to win a fight, one of the things you have to keep up is your confidence. The idea that you can win. Because as anybody will tell you, the second you start believing that you can't win, your chances of winning go down precipitously. So if you are in a situation and you self-call, you are obviously putting yourself in a scenario where you're significantly less likely to win. But by that same logic, every time you go in and there's something close or you do something really well, if you don't celebrate even internally, you're also putting yourself in a situation where you're probably not going to win. Because if you can't be happy about the things that you achieve in your fight, and you can't be happy about the things that you get that you don't think you deserve, you can't be happy about anything. And you're only going to have a negative experience throughout this entire exchange and this entire fight. So what do? Well, I'm not necessarily advocating that you should fist pump and throw your mask on the floor and scream really, really loud every time you make a point. But what you should probably do is be willing to acknowledge in your own mind that you have done a good job. And more importantly, that you should probably tell yourself that after every single exchange, even when it's close, even when you don't think you necessarily deserved it, and even when the judges maybe gave you a little bit of a favor. And the reason I think this is because at the end of the day, if you don't genuinely believe that you can do well, you probably won't. And if every time something goes wrong, you basically focus on that negativity, you're not going to be able to be in the best mind space for that next exchange that's coming up. So take everything that the judges give you, take everything that the audience gives you, and give yourself everything that you deserve when you're fencing well, because at the end of the day, you're not always going to fence well, and you still need to be able to give yourself that mindset in order to come out from a positive or from a negative space to a positive space. This is obviously what my opponent did. When I gave up those points and gave up the win, it gave him a huge morale boost. It put him back in the game. It put him back in the fight. And as a result, he came back from behind of 5 points in a really honestly pretty stunning comeback. He was very happy about his fight. That's why he walked up to me and told me, thanks for an honorable fight, because he simultaneously knew that he did well, and also that the reason he got to continue fighting was because I threw out my own points. So he got to feel good. I got to feel bad, even though the exchanges were exactly the same. The same things that we both experienced were interpreted entirely differently, all because I self-called and he got a little bit of a benefit from that. So again, if you want the overall TLDR here, the idea is that you should always be advocating for yourself. You should always be looking at your fencing in a positive light. And at the end of the day, you should always be training yourself to do that, even when things aren't going your way. Because the second your mental fortitude starts to slip, you're going to do worse and worse and worse. And if it comes down to never self-calling again, I think that's a pretty worthy sacrifice. One, so that the judges can do their job, and two, so that you never put yourself in the negative death spiral like I did here and end up throwing entire fights for no other reason than you thought something happened when it really didn't. So that's going to be it for today. I will see you guys next week with another video, and I hope you like this one.